without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Roughani from the City of Sacramento to talk about the Rails grants. Ash.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
All right, so this is interesting. I used to want to be on the other side of this, but now I am on this side. So, hi everyone, I'm Roughani. I just started at the City of Sacramento about a month ago. So I'm going to do my best to answer all of your questions, to give you a broad overview of the program. But at the very end, my contact information will be on the last slide, so you're welcome to just reach out to me one-on-one directly. As I go through the presentation, feel free to just throw your hand up, ask a question. If you have a question, there's probably other people that have the same question, so better just sort of nip it in the bud right there. But I do ask if you have sort of a series of questions, maybe save that towards the end, and then if you still have a series of questions, let's try to talk offline or something like that so we can move on and make sure everybody gets their questions answered. So without further ado, so this is a huge deal. On Tuesday, June 21st, it was just your average city council meeting, but the members of the city council had before them what are known as the Innovation and Growth Fund policies, guidelines, and criteria. And actually, I'll just give a little plug to our IT department, because everything that is on the city's website, you can actually just type into Google and you can find it from Google. So if you're really interested in reading this document, just Google Innovation and Growth Fund, City of Sacramento, and it'll be right up there. But anyways, on that night, the City Council passed this Innovation and Growth Fund. And it's a big deal because what happened a few years ago is the state ended a program known as redevelopment. And what redevelopment did is it allowed the city to take a portion of the property tax and allocate it to a very specific purpose for redevelopment projects. It's kind of complicated how that ended. I'll point you to Joel if you want to learn more about that. Long story short is the state ended that program, and yet this portion of the property tax was still accumulating, to the point of $10 million. The City of Sacramento currently has $10 million in this Innovation and Growth Fund. And so what we're trying to do is think about what does it mean to actually invest in the community, and thinking about how do we create jobs and diversify the economy. And that was a big piece of Mayor Kevin Johnson's State of the City address this year. He actually unveiled a program, or an initiative known as Economic Development 3.0 initiative. And that's where he's really thinking about, or actually put forth, a really broad set of strategies and goals to create jobs and diversify the economy. And the Innovation and Growth Fund is a huge piece of that. So that's why I included this tweet down here that he posted that very night. He said, "We landed on the moon today, one small step for SAC, one giant step for the next great American city, hashtag innovation, hashtag SAC 3.0. So anyways, big deal. So backing up just a little bit, while the Innovation Growth Fund is a bunch of things I'd be happy to talk to you about. One of them is creating the Mayor's Office for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which I'm a program manager for. It does a bunch of other things, but tonight we're really here to focus on Rails. So what is Rails? It stands for Rapid Acceleration, Innovation, and Leadership in Sacramento. And it's a grants program. And really, it's a grants program for startup enablers. So I'll just kind of stop there and let that soak in. I've gone through a lot of the applications so far, just sort of making sure people are completing them and things like that. And just in full candor, we have received a lot of applications that are not for startup enablers. When we think of what it means to enable more startups, we're thinking about creating the capacity for the ecosystem. And when we think about the ecosystem, it's really just a bunch of things. It's meetup groups like Code for Sacramento. It's co-working spaces like the Urban Hive and Hacker Lab. it's accelerator programs, it's educational programs that train entrepreneurs, it's maker spaces, it's all of these different things that create these different collisions within the community that lead to these serendipitous interactions where people might meet other people with mutual interests and they decide, hey, like you care about the same thing as I do, let's start a startup, like let's do it. And that's like how this stuff happens, and it only happens because we actually have the capacity to do it, because we have the meetups, because we have the spaces, because we have hackathons and all of these great things. So long story short, if you have a thing that helps local entrepreneurs get their businesses off the ground, to help those businesses grow and to help them scale, you should apply for a Rails grant. So what kinds of things are eligible for a Rails grant? These are just a few. They're really not limited, but just organizations themselves, programs of those organizations, sort of one-off projects, single events or a series of events, and then in some cases, apps. And I'll tell you, that's sort of a unique case, but there are apps that you could conceive of that help make this startup ecosystem work. And in terms of sort of the contracting requirement, you will be subject to the city's contracting requirements, whether you're any one of these three things, a nonprofit, a company, or an individual. But I put an asterisk down here because basically, if you're already a nonprofit or a company, you're probably going to already meet a lot of the city's contracting requirements. If you're, I don't want to say just an individual, but if you're just an individual, you might find it a little more difficult. There's some insurance requirements we can talk about. But anyways, it's basically open to anyone and anything as long as it's enabling startups.
Does the company have to physically reside in Sacramento?
The company does not have to physically reside in Sacramento, but its focus should be within Sacramento. Okay. And I would even go so far as to say the vast majority of its focus should be on Sacramento, but it can certainly have a regional, statewide, or even national or global scope. So now I'm going to talk about the three types of grants. And this is where you get the Rails acronym from: Rapid Acceleration, Innovation, and Leadership. So starting at sort of the largest grants, these range from $50,000 to $250,000. Rapid acceleration grants are really for accelerator and incubator programs supporting Sacramento startups through mentorship, networking, education, to raise capital, grow their businesses, and create new jobs.
How strict is that limits? I mean, can you go below about that, or is it absolutely strict?
They're pretty strict. So there's two sides to that. On sort of the ceiling, that's definitely going to be a strict limit. There was a decision that was made to have a minimum amount in the policies, and so this is something we're trying to think about. If you feel like that's too much money, like there's going to be a panel of experts that talk about this that review the applications, and they will know off the bat if you're asking for too much money. So the way around that, to sort of meet that minimum threshold, what I would suggest is figuring out a way to either replicate the thing that you're trying to do or to make it bigger. So that's my only suggestion there. Any other questions so far? All right, great. So those are rapid acceleration grants, really looking at incubator and accelerator programs. The next set of grants are innovation grants. These are really for companies and organizations that are making it easier to work with and in Sacramento, or for local organizations bringing together the innovation community. I think this is probably the vaguest category, but it's a really important one. So if you have questions about whether or not you meet that threshold, just let me know. I'm hesitant to give examples because then it might look like we're favoring one group or another. So, but if you have a personal example, I'd be happy to just answer that question. But again, we're looking at capacity. And then I made a point earlier that apps would be eligible. This is a category where we're talking about civic tech companies. So civic tech is a very specific vertical within the technology and software landscape. And so there we would be looking at apps that might make it easier to engage in a permitting process with government, or maybe it's an app that helps the ecosystem connect with itself or something like that. Any questions on that category? And then the last one is the leadership category. So these grants are really for educational programs, and we're thinking of those in two different buckets. One would be one that trains folks with technical skills. So that's your learn to code programs. Yeah, basically technical skills. The second one would be business skills. So that could be like an entrepreneurial type boot camp program. Any questions on leadership grants?
Is there an overarching division of the pot of money among those three?
No, there's not. And that's going to make for a very interesting selection process. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and how these applications will be considered. The first thing to note is when I talked about this Innovation and Growth Fund, it has a very explicit set of guidelines as well as criteria. Because we're a government agency and we're a city subject to all of the laws that govern cities, we have to follow the policies that we've spelled out. And so within these policies, there are a specific set of guidelines. In the context of the application, you only have to meet one of these. And it's possible that your application might get ranked higher if you meet more than one of these, but you really only have to focus on one. And it's the criteria that you really want to maximize your bets and put your effort into, which I'm going to get to on the next slide. But first I'm going to go through each of these guidelines. So within the parameters of how we can give these grants, it needs to do one or more of the following. Create jobs, make it easier to do business in Sacramento, leverage funds with other funds, other private funds or public funds, increase revenue to the city, accelerate growth, or encourage diversity. So I think this is sort of your safety net. I mean, I think this opens up for a really broad range of programs. In the application, which I'll jump to just right here, so just going to the top, you put your name, contact info, etc., select the grant you're looking for, and then these are the guidelines that you must conform with. So again, you need to do one or more of these, and then in this box, explain how it is that you're going to achieve that objective. Any questions about the guidelines?
A form question.
Yes.
So I was able to go ahead and do an early entry in the form, and I got in pretty early. I received a follow-up notification stating that there had been an alteration,
Yep.
and I needed to go ahead and make an update and change the form. So I made the request,
Yep.
and radio silence. I've not been able to edit my application.
I'm sorry, you said you were able to change the form?
I was not able to.
You were
So
not
when
able,
I
okay.
received a shortened link. I went ahead and clicked the link. It said request to make a change to your form. So I clicked the button that says request submitted, and I haven't heard anything back since then.
Okay, let's troubleshoot that offline.
Okay.
What should have happened is you should have received an email with a link that instead of user accounts, this is the particular platform we're using, so you don't have to enter a username or password. Sends you a unique link, which is your token for the tech people in the room, and that token authenticates you and then shows you your application that you previously filled out. So we'll I want to make sure you're covered there. But again, these are any other questions so far? Okay. So coming back to the guidelines, just make sure you check one of these.
And Ash, in that box
Yes.
that followed in the application form, there's a word limit, there's a character limit, 200 words. But you should really address how, if you check multiple of those, you need to really address how you
Yeah,
are affecting each of those that you've checked above
exactly.
in 200 words.
Well,
Total.
So
Just saying.
this is we're open to changing that. I want to be really clear. So this feedback is super helpful. I can
So
change it right
I'll tell you
now,
right
but
now, I got
weird.
to that point today and I thought, oh crap, 200 words, and I stopped because I haven't figured that out yet. Maybe I talked too much.
Limitations a bit strict.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it just on this question, or is it also
The one above was I went over too.
Yeah, there was a few of them that I had.
The tell us about
200
That's a
characters.
ton.
200 characters is really small for that.
Okay. All right.
Brevity.
Well, right, but
But if you're
also grammar and
We have to,
LOL,
right.
we just better acronyms.
let's. Yeah. So we'll definitely update those. I guess it would be helpful though to get a sense of a reasonable length that's not too long. I mean, there was some intentionality
Yeah,
to
of
try to
course.
keep people concise.
Yeah.
But I take your point that if you're
It's a rough tweet, like another 50 characters.
yeah. Well, let me. How about I'll make an update tonight, send it back, and then all of you, I'll just post it if you RSVP'd on meetup.com. Say, hey everybody, it's Ash. Thanks for coming to the meetup last night. I updated the application. Let me know if you still feel like you need more room. And then,
Is the entire, is this just like kind of a preliminary and then there's a follow-up? Or is everything based off this one form?
there is an optional interview period that we haven't figured out whether or not we're going to interview anybody at all, a subset of folks, or everybody who applied. So
Good luck with that.
we're still working on it.
Okay, work in progress.
Yeah.
All within the requirements of the Innovation and
Figuring it out, right? You know.
What is
It's
it?
honest.
Guidelines, criteria, policy and guidelines.
Learning.
So the
Yeah,
deadline
excellent,
was
yeah.
the 22nd?
Yes.
Is there any advantage to submitting early and getting feedback?
Yes, thank you for asking that. I feel like I planted that. This is, I mean, as long as we're going to need to work on the issue of, did anybody else ask to edit their previously submitted application and wasn't able to do that? Or I'll ask you weren't able to.
I wasn't initially, then I emailed Avi and he fixed it up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that's not a systemic issue, but yes, like, if you get your application in early, we're going to be screening them and saying, hey, this is incomplete, or hey, you could be more specific about that. We're trying to figure out we can't really give you feedback on sort of the quality of your answers, but if we can identify whether or not you met sort of the minimum.
It's not like some accelerator programs where like it doesn't even get looked at until the deadline.
Oh right, no. This is all we're agile, so we do things in sprints, iterations. So yeah. So there isn't the takeaway there is get your application in early. People will look at it. If we feel like there's critical information missing or you went way off track, we're going to circle back with you and say, hey, we didn't really understand what you meant by this. Please go in and change it. But not before we fix the authentication.
So you have an automation issue.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions so far? We're actually almost done. So. And there will be time for questions at the end, so don't feel like you have to just ask them for each slide. So the guidelines, okay. Yes, okay. So in terms of the process, I should actually jump ahead real quick. I'm going to come back to the criteria because the criteria are really important. That's what's going to inform the content of your application. So you're going to submit the applications to us. We are MOFIE, Mayor's Office for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We're going to then screen the applications, and then we're going to convene an internal review team whose job it will be to basically aggregate the applications, put them into different buckets, and help this Mayor's Tech Council actually make the final decision. So the mayor has not yet appointed, but he will soon appoint a tech council that will have, and this is actually not even the final word, but they will make sort of the final recommendation that we as staff then put forth to the city council. The city council is actually going to look at all of these grants as a single package, and then they're going to vote yes or no on the whole thing. And then EDD's Economic Development Department, they're going to actually push the money out. And then us as MOFIE, we're going to conduct follow-up. We're going to establish some metrics. We want to make sure we know where the money's going. There's a huge part of California state law, and actually in most states across the country, that anytime a government spends money, there needs to be public benefit. So an example of this is the arena. You might be thinking, oh, we gave money to build an arena. But there actually is public benefit to that in terms of the direct and indirect economic development associated with that. We have to apply the same principles to these grants. So that we're just sort of covering the bases there. So that's the process. Now I'm going to come back to any questions on the process?
Quick question. The tech council, will it be selected? Is there a timeline? I'm curious if it'll be under Johnson or Steinberg.
Yeah.
Oh, it'll be under Mayor Johnson.
Okay.
So the current timeline, which is in another slide, the applications are due on July 22nd. We're actually trying to make the awards and everything in late August, early September.
Do you know if he's sourcing that? Is it like the idea to get the tech council from people here in Sacramento, or is he going to the Bay Area? Or?
It's a mix. Yeah, it's mostly fun. It's actually a very small group. It's just from sort of a practical point, there's a lot of applications we're going to receive, and to have a lot of people reviewing a lot of applications, it's just going to be cumbersome. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I came in late, so if this question has already been asked, excuse me. So I heard you say that the approval, it's going to go to the city council for final approval. It's going to be approved as a package. So the city council is not going to approve the individual grants. It's the whole thing. Who's approving the individual grants? Is that?
That's the tech council, it's basically the tech council.
So then, like, let's say we applied for 100,000, and say the tech council, whoever's going through this, goes, oh, that's way too much money. Do we get notified to say, hey, we think you could do it in less money, or is that something that just kind of kicks us out type of thing? We can't change that.
It's a really good question. We're actually in the step number 3. We're actually going to try and catch those issues there. And yes, we will basically say, hey, we think your application is promising, and we want to make sure that the Mayor's Tech Council can review it, but do you think you could accomplish, what the goals that you set out, or at least a portion of them on a smaller budget? The reality is, folks on a smaller budget will allow us to give more grants. That makes more people happy, and honestly, we might have more impact that way. So, it's just sort of a word of advice. Don't overestimate. Like, don't do that, because then it will affect the way that the folks, the review team actually weights your application. We'll just be like, well, that's not even realistic. And knowing that smaller grants will be able to give out more money. So,
would it work the vice versa? Oh, we think you need more money to get this done. Your team believes, based on detail, what other space that we need or anything like that, you might need another 15,000. Is that something that you would probably respond back in similar fashion, or?
It's possible. I honestly, it's hard for me to see that happening, especially I'm just telling you my opinion when I was in your shoes like a month ago. I feel like I could get a lot done on the minimum of each of these grants, and actually, that's kind of why they brought me into City Hall, because they want sort of that community perspective of what's like realistic, what's not. So yeah, just my personal opinion, I think you can get a lot done at the minimum amount. So I would definitely stay in the lower end if you can, if you really feel like, no, man, our program is really awesome, we totally deserve that full grant, like, just go for it, go for the gold.
Ash, I've got a question about the makeup of the tech council relative to the base of potential applicants and how you expect to handle something like an issue of conflict of interest. Because obviously you're going to want to select folks, knowledgeable folks for the tech council who might also very plausibly be involved in one or more of the potential applications.
Yeah, so what we try to do in our recommendations to the mayor is identify people who are highly unlikely to have that conflict of interest in the first place. If for some reason that happens, those individuals would have to recuse themselves
from the whole thing. From the whole thing?
My assumption, this is just based on existing law, is they would only recuse themselves from the application if they have a conflict. But we could consider that.
I wasn't recommending. I was just given
our
the complexity of
is to avoid that situation.
Yeah. No. Clearly. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
If you guys were a venture fund, there would be an assessment at some future point of how effective, what was the return on this investment?
Yeah.
What look back is the city planning to do on this, and what are they going to look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the mayor's Economic Development 3.0 initiative, he set out a goal for over the next 5 years to create 500 new companies and 5,000 new jobs. So that's a rate of 100 odd companies per year and 1,000 new. So I wasn't a math major. Wow, 1,000 new. Yeah, so 1,000 new jobs per year. So yeah, they're pretty ambitious, but basically as a grant applicant, what we're really going to be focusing on is your direct impact and your metrics, and you, as a requirement for receiving a grant, you will be required to report back during some period of time, like what you've actually done. We're going to take all those numbers, mash them all together, report them out, and we'll then try to see if it's always a challenge to tie like the direct impact of a program versus sort of the indirect, or what you might call an output versus an outcome. But there will be an effort to do that, for sure.
And the second one is, do you see this as a one-shot grant program, or is this an annual?
I have great news. The Innovation Growth Fund specifies this as an annual grant program. So every year we have up to $1 million to give out. An important point to note is if we go through the applications that are submitted in this round, we could choose to only allocate a portion of the funds and then do another round of grants in, say, January or something like that. So, thanks for asking.
So this same program, if you're backed already, are you more likely to get funded?
If you're financially backed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the guidelines is right here, leverage funds with other private or public funds. So yeah, if you're financially backed, that would count, but I will just clarify that what we're looking for is if the city gives you money, then that makes it more likely that you're backed.
Is there anything specific about that, like is it going to be a one-to-one match, like you have to be funded at the decent level of the grant?
But I guess the point there is there would be more points awarded for applicants who have a higher leverage, more leverage. That's like the Wall Street term, right?
So you're saying that you're leaning towards more giving out more grants, smaller grants, more grants, so there's more awardees? Or is it more of how many people are impacted ultimately overall? I mean, because they're two different things.
Yeah.
So what's more important there, in your opinion?
I think the latter, the impact. I mean, we want the most impact possible. So if we think we can get greater impact by offering a smaller number of grants at a larger amount, I assume the Tech Council will move in that direction. But I think it's a hard decision to make until we actually see what's in front of us. Like, what's the full set of applications? Like, what are people trying to accomplish?
So this year, is it said $1 or $2 million of the $10 million?
$1 million.
$1 million. Okay, so it'll be $9 million over the next 4 years after this year. Is that the idea?
Without going into too much detail, there are other initiatives in the works that will start to draw down from the full $10 million. When I first started, I talked about this portion of the property tax that's year over year being calculated. That's to the tune of $2 million a year. And so basically the way we budgeted this is that the grants program each year will be $1 million. There's another $400,000 or $500,000 for what are called innovation incentives. And then there's a little teeny tiny program called City Hall Tech. And then there's actually the budget for the office itself. And what we try to do is say we have this recurring revenue of $2 million. What are the things that we want to do on an ongoing basis? Can we match that up with $2 million? And so the goal is to continue funding these efforts with those $2 million on a recurring basis.
Is the idea that the Rails program specifically will be $1 million over the next 5 years?
Yes. Yep.
And will you be able to, if you get approved this year, will that preclude you from being approved in future years, or?
Not necessarily. The only point I'd say about that, though, is now we know what we're getting for our money, so that can work both for you and against it. I mean, in the optimistic scenario, you're just like kicking butt. You're like having all this impact. We see all this growth. Like, I assume the Tech Council is going to want to keep.
Yeah, that was the thought.
Yes. All right, I know I didn't really touch on the criteria, and this is frankly the most important part. So I just want to cover these really quickly. Proven track record, you've done something. It doesn't have to be within the organization or project that you're currently applying for, but you as an individual or an applicant, we want to be able to see that you do have a track record. Clear actionable plans that achieve the Rails objectives. This is worth noting that criterion is actually in this first question. So when we say, do you have a clear actionable plan for success? That's what we're talking about here. Do you have a clear actionable plan that achieves these objectives? Then for the rest of these, does it fill an industry gap? Would city funds be catalytic to completing the project? What's the value to the innovation ecosystem? And then what are your deliverables and metrics? Getting at the point earlier made about how are we going to measure this stuff. Basically, for each one of those points, so here's a hint. You ought to, if the Tech Council is going to score you based on this, your answer to each of these questions ought to be yes. Because what happens is, I mean,
Yes,
it's not that simple. Like
because Ash said so.
Right, exactly.
And so, hold on, let me refresh the page. Yes. All right, so you say yes, and then you get a pop-up with 100 words. 100 words.
Like a tweet. Less than a tweet.
There's that abstract service.
So yeah, you basically get 100 words per, unless I hear otherwise. I mean, like I said, my contact info is at the end. Just bug me if you feel like that's really not enough. But once you add all this stuff up, we're looking at like 4 or 5 pages of stuff that we have to read. We're expecting over 200 applications, so the point is to be concise. Like, just be concise. Like, or try to be concise. If you really feel like, I can't be concise, let me know. We'll see what we can do. But just keep in mind, each time we change the application, we're going to have to send a notice out to everyone. Hey everybody, we updated the application. Please go back in and make your updates. So I'm just going to wrap up here and then see if we have any other questions. I went through the approval process. Timeline, so the council's already adopted the policies. The application period is opened. This deadline on Friday, July 22nd is at 11:59 p.m. because basically at midnight we're going to start looking at these because we only have about 5 days to convene the tech council, get them this information. Then this other point it's a little unclear at this point, but what we're being told by the city attorney's office is we actually have to have the contracts finalized and signed by the manager, but they don't, city manager, but they don't actually go into effect until the city council approves them. Versus before we thought maybe the city council could approve them and then we could do the contract later. But just something to keep in mind. And then city council on August 16th may approve this. So.
You guys gonna close out your revisions at a certain point for the application? Like, not have like a revision like on 22nd?
Yeah. After the 22nd, you won't get to edit them.
It's like, don't make a change to the application.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, no. Let's just say 10 days. Well, I think this one is super helpful. I think the sooner you all can get us information, let's say by the end of this week.
What would be considered a proven track record for our educational organization?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you have a track record of instructing students or teaching previously?
My team does. So would this be more of a reflection of the program or the people running the program?
Either or. So if it's a program that has existed in the past and it has a track record, by all means, talk about the track record of your program. If your program is new and you don't have a track record, talk about your personal or your team's track record.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I see sort of this, you've got this conciseness, this word limit and the character limit, but then now also you want to say, okay, we want to see your track record under 100 characters. And so that's what I'm struggling with. If we want to show, really our if we want to really kind of give a mini resume, it's got to exceed that. So that's the one thing that I'm sort of struggling with. Unless I just put hyperlinks on all the answers and call it a day.
It's a good question. I mean, the thing that would be most helpful for me is to get just a bunch of emails, and I will just, by the weight of those emails, we will take them into account and make the necessary adjustments. It's super helpful feedback. I think, again, we're trying to be as concise as possible. And I guess, I'll leave it at that.
I got a question about confidentiality of the entries.
Yep.
Is there any confidentiality or not?
Nope. And this is just state law we're dealing with. All applications are subject to what's called the California Public Records Act. California Public Records Act. And so that means they can be what's called PRA, which means that anybody can access them.
The full application that you submit is available to the public.
I believe we can redact personal contact information, but your name would be on there. So we would redact your email address, but this is only if somebody.
Right. I mean, there's a difference between you're not posting them on a website for the world to see, but if somebody requested that information, you would be obligated to provide it.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Under certain limitations.
Right.
Yeah.
And can your name be associated in more than one entry?
Yeah, that's interesting. So what, and I'll tell you why that's interesting. So what we've been telling people so far, and this is like the way that we've been thinking about it, is you could be one super organization, and your super organization applies for 2 or more grants, and that would be fine. We don't want organizations applying for the same grant, for the same type of grant. However, I think the scenario that you might be raising is, what if there are 2 separate organizations that you just happen to be affiliated with? Yeah, so in that case, yes, you're good.
Just to clarify that, so the same entity can apply for the innovation grant, the leadership grant, and the rapid acceleration grant?
Yes.
Oh,
And that doesn't
for
mean that they're
different
going to
pieces
be
of work.
awarded all 3. They may not get any of them.
Gotcha.
Would you expect that to be on one application or 3
No, they would be
separate?
separate applications, and that's actually just a function of the application itself.
So if 200 applications, you expected 200 applications, and you're looking at doing small grants. Small grants, in your opinion, are what, about 50,000? Or smaller than that?
It depends on the smaller on the continuum for each type of grant.
Okay.
Because it's a different range.
And it's $1 million, so the Rails grant's $1 million in total.
Correct.
So it's only maybe 20, 30 grants if they're small. You get a couple large ones and less than that. So you guys are going to vent out 200 applications within 5 days? And then you're looking at track record. So for those that have existing programs, they're looking for additional funding, probably have an upper hand for those who are new programs that are not yet in place.
Yeah.
So if somebody has a new program and they're up against all these others that have existing programs, but this is a pretty innovative, creative program, so they're still going to give it more weight for those because they have a track record?
So can I actually ask you on that point? I want to push back a little bit. How will the review panel know that it's a creative, innovative program if they haven't seen it actually executed by the team that's applying?
Well then, yeah, that's true, but then at the other end of the argument is you're not really giving new programs an opportunity. You're basically going to be funding existing programs.
And that actually is a good segue. I'm actually going to answer your question.
Okay.
This is our first time doing this.
Yeah.
We have some policies in place. We're doing meetings like this. By the way, if you know of other people who would be interested in a meeting like this and you can fill a room like this, just get a hold of me and I'm happy to come speak and talk to those folks. We want as many people interested in applying as possible. But long story short, there's a lot of firsts associated with this. We're really just thinking about this as a pilot project, honestly. And when we come back next year, we're going to have like just everything as much as possible is going to be spelled out up front. And we hope that we're going to learn a lot from this time around. And I think to your point, like I mean, you're right. We want to support those kinds of programs. We're not looking for sort of the same thing that's been done.
Yeah, that's okay.
So with that, I can take a few more questions and then maybe we can wrap up with the other part of this meetup, and then I'll just stick around afterwards for other questions you might have. Yes?
So, maybe a question from the other side of the fence, and you can tell me if you want to answer this offline or not, but can you talk a little bit about what the Innovations Fund is doing for the startup companies? You know, like, is that coming? Is that once this is done, because it's great to have more facilities like this and programs that can help startups, but...
Yeah, so the mayor convened a bunch of stakeholders and we heard feedback about what could be done to bolster our local startup ecosystem. The number one complaint we heard was lack of access to capital. And so to address that issue, we're currently exploring ways that the city could somehow invest in venture capital funds that would invest in local startups. It's really complicated how we actually do that, but there's a lot of work being done to figure out how we can do that. I think it will be a good opportunity for the city to show its leadership, and then that would hopefully even attract more venture capital to the region.
So do you think it'll be another like 6 months or a year before, like, so just transparency, like I'm the startup, I'm the guy that's looking for, you know, the help and that kind of thing. So is that like another 6 months or a year before the innovation is going to be able to contribute to something like what I'm doing?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if what I was just talking about went before the city council before any of this did.
Wow.
Wow.
Just leave it at
Wow.
that.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Wow.
Other questions?
On the apps piece that you mentioned earlier, what suggestions would you have in who to contact for those civic needs that might be needed that we're not aware of?
So Joel is
Come out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think your first entry point is Code for Sacramento. If you RSVP for this meetup on meetup.com, you're now part of the meetup. They meet weekly.
Next week at the
We
Hacker
meet
Lab.
weekly. I don't know. And I think there's like a lot of government folks that come out to that. And then the second path would be like you can email me or we'll start. I mean, based on what you're interested in, if it's health, public safety.
Exactly.
Social services, there's lots and lots of opportunities. We know a lot of people.
Reach out to us and yeah.
What's the name of your meetup group?
So this is Code for Sacramento. We meet every week, usually here, sometimes at the Hacker Lab, next week at the Hacker Lab.
Other questions?